get started, has anyone in the room ever deployed to a Red Cross disaster relief operation? Salvation Army, FEMA?
Does that include shelter?
I'm sorry?
Does that include a shelter site?
No, I would say the actual disaster, like a hurricane or a tornado or an earthquake or a fire. Well, neither had I. So, telling this, be careful what you wish for. You just might get it, and you'll kind of figure that out as we go along here. I'm Weymouth Walker. You can imagine back in 1957 as a novice trying to send name here Weymouth in Morse code. I shortened it away very quickly, and I still get people who say, not sure I got your name, old man. Got my novice in February of '57, the general in October, and moved up to advanced and extra in the mid-'80s. But let's talk about Hurricane Maria. Now, they'd had two hurricanes, Irma, which skirted past the northern corner, the northern coast, and then Maria, which hit the southeast corner and then walked its way across the entire island. Category 5, with gusts to 180. The mayor and governor of Puerto Rico both said that it was like a 50-mile wide tornado that just walked across the island. When they finished, when this hurricane finished, the entire island, 3.5 million people were without power. Now, we all know why hurricanes are bad, from just the force of the wind and the destruction they do. But when you lose power, like they lost power, it's the greatest power loss in the history of the United States for a storm. There have been many times where hurricanes have knocked 1 million, 1.5 million, 2 million people out, but all 3.5 million people in Puerto Rico. Why is that so bad? Well, when you lose power, like they had lost it for months, you've got problems. Obviously, you have no light at night, you have no air conditioning, you don't have clean water, you don't have sewage, you don't have refrigerated food storage, you don't have anything. There are no banks, there are no ATMs, there are no grocery stores, there are no drug stores. The whole time I was in Puerto Rico for 3 weeks, there were no traffic lights. Every intersection was a four-way stop, and there were lots of accidents. The most dangerous thing I did every day was commute from the Red Cross dormitory to the Red Cross headquarters. It was only 3.5 miles. And I'd hitch a ride with somebody, and we'd darn near get hit every day. The people of Puerto Rico had one mission every day when they woke up. Somebody left the house looking for water, any kind of water, from a pond, stream, mud puddle. Here's a lady getting water from a concrete culvert. We saw a lot of this as we were driving around. The water table was so high, Puerto Rico got feet of rain, not inches, feet of rain. They hammered PVC pipes into the hillside, and lo and behold, here's a stream of water going up. This lady is washing her laundry in this tub. I saw women bathing, literally washing their hair, not bathing, but washing their hair. Anything that was plastic was being used to get water. I saw a guy in a car with a 50-gallon barrel filled with water, and he was driving at about 2 miles an hour because the water was sloshing, and the car was already down on the axle. Pretty amazing stuff. Saw this quite a lot. We also saw unbelievable damage. The entire island was damaged somehow. Now, your concrete buildings in San Juan didn't get much damage, but they had no power. I mean, for months without power. Out in the outlying rural areas, if you notice, there are no leaves on any of the trees. Everything was stripped of foliage. This was across the entire island. You look out over vast valleys that were all brown. And the streams, everywhere there was a stream, it became a raging torrent 30 or 40 feet above its normal level. Lots of mud deposited, lots of mudslides, Lots of bridges approaches washed out. The bridge span washed away. When our vehicles were out around the island, the whole time we were there, every time it would rain, there was a flash flood. There was another mudslide, another road closed, another bridge taken out. And still, many of the rural areas our guys tried to go to, the roads were closed. I found out that in Puerto Rico, this is how your addresses go. You're at kilometer 3.4 on State Route something. There's no 1580 Hickory Crest Boulevard. None of that stuff. So it was real hard to find some of these people who needed help. Wooden structures out in the countryside simply exploded. Can you imagine that somebody spent their whole life putting a roof over their head, and in just a matter of minutes it was gone? I have no idea where these people were during the storm, but they obviously are trying to make the best of it. They got some chairs set up here, probably have a little cocktail every evening, and wonder what the heck they're going to do. So let's back up now. For the first time in the history, Red Cross requested ham radio operators. They requested them via the ARRL. This all happened in 84 hours of elapsed time for me, and I'll show you the timeline here in a minute. 430 people answered the email that came out on a Sunday night from the ARRL. When I got an email the next night, there were 37 email addresses on it. Those of us that had been selected. When we got to the staging area, the Crown Plaza at the Atlanta airport, there were 22 of us. 15 had been eliminated for medical or background reasons. So all of the time we were there, the ARRL was talking about the force of 50. The force of 50, we were 22. We picked up one other guy that was supposed to go to one of the Virgin Islands, another guy that had just self-deployed down there, he spoke Spanish, he was from Colombia originally, so he ended up with us. So we ended up about 24 strong, something like that. The night of the 24th was when I read the email from the ARRL, and I called my wife into the room, and she looked at that and she said, "Honey, why don't you volunteer for that? You'd be perfect." That, ladies and gentlemen, is why I've been married to that woman for 51 plus years. She thinks I can do anything. Because for 53 years that I've known her, I've lied to her and told her I can do anything. All evidence to the contrary notwithstanding. So I answered the form, 50 questions or something like that on the survey. The next morning, on the 25th, I hadn't heard anything from the ARRL, so I called them. I ended up calling the emergency preparedness manager, Mike Corey, at K8EAB or CU, something like that. Left a voicemail. "Hey, I'm retired. I've been a ham for a long time. I'd really like to go do this." More about that in a minute. About an hour later, I get a phone call, and it's Mike Corey. He steps me through the same 50 questions I had answered the night before. And when I hung up from that phone call, I told my wife, well, if I thought there was no way now, there really is no way that they're ever going to select me. Well, guess what? That night, my in-basket started filling up again, this time with email from the Red Cross. Forms for me to fill out, medical history, background check. Here's this checklist of items that I had to buy somewhere, REI. And I was supposed to go to the Red Cross headquarters at Piedmont and Monroe and pick up two $1,000 debit mission cards and take $300 out on each one the day I got them, and $300 more the following day on both cards. $1,200 in cash in my pocket to go to Puerto Rico. Reason for that should be obvious here as we go forward. Okay, that same day, I picked up the mission debit cards. I met my son, who 23 years ago was a paratrooper medic in the Army for 4 years, very comfortable with primitive camping, and he and I walked up and down the aisles at REI. I'm reading the list, and he's pulling things off the shelf, plus a few other things that he thought I absolutely had to have. like a solar cell phone recharger, and believe it or not, that came in very handy. $430 later, I'm leaving REI, and my son gives me this big rolling backpack. Thank heavens. When I got to the airport, that thing weighed 73 pounds. Was I overpacked? You bet I was. I had 4 rolls of toilet paper because there wasn't any down there. Okay, here I am, and on the very next day with this load of baggage and everything. I had a 37-pound handbag, the rolling backpack of 73 pounds. When I got to the airport hotel, the Red Cross briefed us, and then we hams broke away to inventory all the equipment that the ARRL had sent us. Each one of these 50-pound Pelican cases had an ICOM 7200 in it, had a power supply, an antenna tuner, a hand mic, wire for an antenna, a center feed point for a dipole, coax, some tools, no nylon cord to hold up the ends of the antenna. So we sent out one of our guys and he bought every spool of paracord or nylon cord he could find at 2 different Home Depot stores. And we put 200-foot spools into each one of those Pelican cases. I had the Pelican case that had 30 HTs in it. They were ICOM V82s. Why did we pick those? Why did they pick them? Because you could pop the back off and power them with AA batteries. And I had tons of AA batteries. Where they thought we were going to buy AA batteries if we need them is another question. So here I am, finally, at the airport the night of the 27th. 3 o'clock the next morning, we loaded everything onto a van and into other trucks to pick up these 30 51-pound Pelican cases and all of our luggage. And we went and sat in the airport till 8:30 when we launched on the JetBlue charter. When we got in the air, the pilot told us he had no idea whether we'd be able to land or not because there's nothing down there, no ILS, no tower radio. The tower had a portable radio. That's it, no radar, no air traffic control, everything VFR. If the field was IFR when we got there, we'd have to divert somewhere else. Fortunately, it wasn't. We landed, it was hot. The only thing that was working at the airport was the baggage conveyor. Got all our bags, and here I am with 150 pounds of stuff. At age 74, I'm humping this stuff about a quarter of a mile to a staging area where we sat for another 4 hours waiting for vehicles to come pick us up. This all happened, as I said, in 84 hours of elapsed time. We finally got taken to a shelter. Red Cross had arranged for a shelter in a church. It was no longer being used as a church because no one could come to church. Red Cross set up all these cots, pushed all the pews to the back. And this is what it looked like later on. Every cot had a Red Cross blanket, itchy but warm. This is what it looked like when we were all there. Unfortunately, as hams, we all got there too late to get a cot. This is where we slept on the pews for 5 nights. 2 of us to a pew. This is actually my arm. I'm sitting here staking out my front row pew seat. You know how wide the pews are?
Yeah.
So I slept on one side. The best thing I ever packed, by the way, was a My Pillow queen-size pillow with that rolling backpack. I doubled it up, and I at least had a pillow. There were a lot of people there that were sleeping on the Red Cross blanket as a pillow. All kinds of Red Cross workers. This is a ham. All of us slept in the pews for 5 nights in a row. The generators were working that night. The lights are on. None of these fans were turning. There was no air conditioning. It was not very comfortable. One night when the generators weren't working and there was no lights and no fans and no portable swamp coolers, which you don't see here, but they are in my YouTube video if you've seen that or want to see it, I'll tell you how to go look at it. The only way I could sleep was I went down the walkway behind the building here to the men's room, got my t-shirt soaking wet, wrung it out, put it back on, and finally I could get a few hours of shot. After 5 days, we got moved into the San Juan University dormitory, and I thought I had died and gone to heaven. We had air conditioning from 6 o'clock at night to 8 o'clock the next morning. Then they would turn the generator off. No power, no water. But while the generator's on, we had hot and cold showers, flush toilets, sinks. We had 2 to a suite, 1 small area for dining with a microwave and a fridge, a private room that I could lock the door, so it was great. Red Cross headquarters. Red Cross had leased a floor from Humana, Telemundo, and that building had an enormous generator. We had power the whole time we were there. No hot water, just cold water. By the way, at that Red Cross shelter, the nurses, the Red Cross nurses, nicknamed it Sweltered 2 instead of Sheltered 2 because it was awful. The only thing that the Red Cross briefing at the airport in Atlanta told us that was correct was your living conditions are going to be austere. Everything else was not what we expected when we got there. This is a calm day. Everybody's sitting down for the most part. In my video, you'll see everyone is standing up. They're all talking Spanish at the top of their lungs. There are paper signs stuck up on the wall everywhere that say silencio, silence. What a joke. We had one guy who had extensive ARES experience, Joe Bassett, W1CN. Joe is a Baptist pastor in Jacksonville, Florida, Clay County. He had gotten to Clay County and there were only 5 people in the ARES organization. Hams were not allowed in any of the Clay County EOCs, medical, police, or fire. Today there are 85 people in the ARES organization and a waiting list of people to get in. They have ham stations in every one of the EOCs in Clay County. If you can Google Clay County ARES, you will find an extensive website. And these people are trained, they're all interchangeable. Everybody can do everybody else's job. They're all general class and above. And they have a waiting list of people to get into the organization. And they performed extremely well during Hurricane Irma. So Joe is our leader because he knows things like WinLink, he knows the ICS system, he knows all about the Red Cross, he knows all about ARES. He ended up being our leader. He staffed all the positions we had and assigned people. The other guy we had was Father Rafael Ortiz, an Episcopal minister. The third guy at Red Cross headquarters was the poor Episcopalian me. Pretty much a heathen by comparison to these 2 guys. I call this guy Padre, just like Colonel Potter called Father Mulcahy on MASH. He was born in Puerto Rico. He left in 1974 and had not been back. He had family members. He left, did 23 years in the Army in logistics. Then God found him and he became an Episcopal minister in a town in between Knoxville and Sevierville. So here I am in between these 2 guys and they're constantly telling jokes about the rabbi, the priest, and they went into a bar. Did you hear this one? You know, he spoke fluent Spanish, of course, so he was very invaluable. He went back to see his family. He had a 94-year-old uncle and lots of cousins. Very moving day for him. This gentleman is Oscar Resto. He was the ARRL section manager in Puerto Rico, KP4RF. These Post-it notes you see on this map of Puerto Rico are hospitals or fire stations where we had people deployed. We had about 10 people out all over the island. The island is 100 miles long by 35 miles wide. And if you notice this topographical feature right down the center, it's a mountain range.
Yeah.
What's the highest elevation in Georgia? 47 something, and it's Brass Down Ball, is it? Yeah. Well, Puerto Rico is almost 4,000 feet. I never knew that. Puerto Rico's not volcanic. They have no volcanoes at all. This is billions of years ago, the tectonic plates just pushed up. So why was that of any significance? It meant that once our hams left San Juan and went over that mountain range, they were no longer in contact with us in all these daily caravans that we sent out that I'll tell you about. This is our radio room, 9 by 7. 3 people was a crowd. We frequently had 5 or 6 or 7 people in there, and we had to keep throwing people out. As yours truly operating a 2-meter radio area. The equipment was great. These ICOM 7200s were chosen, I'm told, because they had a built-in sound card, so they could do the analog to digital conversion. Wait, the icon is barely visible here. Every day, some of our hams accompanied 3 different teams. One ham accompanied 3 nurses. One ham accompanied a carload of people who did what was called safe and well. These people went into a town, went to the post office, said, "Where is Miguel Rodriguez? Where is Armando so-and-so?" And the postmaster knew where everybody was in these small towns. Their family wanted to know, did my relative make it through the storm? Is he or she alive and well? Do they need anything? There are 3 hams in this picture. The other team set up a satellite station, and anybody could make a 2-minute phone call anywhere in the world at no charge. This was called reunification. Week 1, while we were there, most of our traffic involved arranging evacuations for critical care patients because the hospitals were running out of diesel fuel for the generators. They'd been running for 3 weeks when we got there. 3 weeks or more without power. The entire island has only 1 power station on the south coast, and then the grid of wires, 50,000 telephone poles were down. Power station was out of commission, so nobody had power in Puerto Rico unless it was a generator. You'd be surprised how many businesses had generators because the Electric Power Authority, PREPA, Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority, was bankrupt and their plant was in bad shape before the hurricanes hit. Week 2, the generators were starting to fail. You can't run these generators 24/7 for months and months and weeks without having some problems. The great news at San Juan University dorm was they shut down every morning at 8 a.m., fired back up at 6 p.m. at night. They had great generators.
What kind of generators were they?
All I can tell you is they were big and they were diesel. They were far enough away that I could barely hear them in the dormitory. Couldn't see them. They were huge, I do know that. Week 3, the hospitals are now running out of liquid oxygen. There were only 2 plants on the island that could make it. Both of them were damaged and out of commission. Each one of these occurrences meant evacuation of critical care patients from the outlying hospital into the big central medical facility in San Juan, Centro Medico. Hold on for a second. So here we are arranging evacuations by ground ambulance and sometimes air ambulance. We had doctors in Puerto Rico talking to doctors at outlying hospitals over our radio network. We just handed them the mic and say, when you're finished talking, say over. And there it went in Spanish, back and forth, until they decided, yes, this patient needs to be transferred. We'll arrange for the ambulance. This was still going on when we left. Okay, did we make a difference? We did a lot of things wrong. You can imagine that 84 hours is not enough time to plan for a disaster that impacted 3.5 million people. In addition, this disaster was not Florida or Texas. This is an island 1,600 miles away from the continental United States, or 1,500, whichever. Everything was more difficult. For instance, when we flew in, there were all these ships anchored out in San Juan Harbor that couldn't land. Why couldn't they dock? Something called the Jones Act. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's been around for over 100 years. It says that if you're going to send something to Puerto Rico or there are other ports, you first have to send it to a U.S. port where it's offloaded and unloaded onto an American vessel, crewed by Americans, and then it can go to Puerto Rico. Makes everything late and expensive. Finally, after we'd been there for a week, someone suspended the Jones Act, and all these ships now from foreign countries could dock. Not the end of the problem. There was nobody there to drive the trucks when they finally did dock. Everybody's up in the hills trying to get water and food for themselves every day. The grocery stores, if they were open at all, would open and let 1 or 2 people in at a time, and those people had 5 minutes to buy whatever they could find in the store. They brought it to the front register, they paid in cash, they didn't always get change. There was no way to make change. There were no point of sale terminals, there were no credit card processing machines. Everything was cash. Same thing with gasoline. When you found a station that was operating, there were long lines of cars, a mile long or more, 5 gallons per customer, cash only. May not get change. If you had a $20 bill, you weren't going to get change. They couldn't give it to you. They'd write you a receipt by hand for change, and you go back later. One thing that was open everywhere I saw was Burger King restaurants. I don't know how or why. They all had generators, they all had air conditioning, they all had Wi-Fi, and they had food. I must have eaten at Burger King every night we came home from the shift. There was one near the dorm. Okay. The number 2 guy came into our radio room one day to talk about a personnel issue, and he sat down. He was from Louisville, Kentucky. He'd been gone since the first few days of August. One disaster after another. And he said, in the United States, I can have 2 18-wheelers anywhere I want them in 24 hours, loaded with anything I need them loaded with. He said, here it takes more than 2 weeks. Again, 50,000 telephone poles. You know how long that takes to set 50,000 telephone poles? That's before you can restring all the wire. I checked a site today, there's still 50,000 people in Puerto Rico without power. That's been more than 6 months now. Almost 9 months. So the Red Cross guy said, we did things with you guys that we could not otherwise have done. The communications links that you established, the patient transfers, the emergency fuel requests. Fuel came from FEMA. They'd send trucks to these hospitals, rationing, but that's where it came from. We sent our messages to FEMA and they handled them. Never did know if they handled them. The only way we knew was we didn't get another call from that same hospital. This guy, this number 2 guy, had been a Red Cross volunteer for 14 years, and then he had been an employee for 28. So he really, and you see him in my video holding a meeting in the morning. He's speaking in English, and someone right beside him is translating. The ARRL and DX Engineering got together to get all this radio equipment together, get it packed, get it sent to Newington. Newington somehow sent it to Atlanta, and we took it with us to San Juan. The only thing that we didn't have that we should have had probably from day one were Heil or some kind of pro set, headset boom mic. If you opened our radio room door with all those people speaking in Spanish outside, you could not hear yourself think. We got 30 headsets sent to us by Bob Heil, FedEx, overnight. Piled them all outside our room. The next morning, 7 of them were missing. So then we had to learn to pull them inside the room. Human nature. Funny things that happened. I'm not sure you'd call this funny. There are 2 things that come to my mind. I got tapped one day to go with 3 Red Cross nurses. They grabbed me at 7 a.m. They said the other 2 vehicles, ones that go looking for people and the ones that set up the satellite station, aren't ready. We're leaving. You can either come with us or stay. We don't care. I said, I'm coming. So here I am. I've got a 50-watt UHF radio in my lap. It's plugged into the cigarette lighter, and there's a mag mount on the car. We're leaving, and I'm asking, why don't we have bottles of water? Red Cross didn't have any that day. We're stopping at a big box store on our way out of town. Well, so we stop at a Walmart. I'm sitting in the car. They 3 nurses. The 3 nurses are as follows. A lady named Terry. She had done 8 years in the Coast Guard, enlisted, went to medical school, got her degree, got her commission, and did 15 more years in the Navy, retired as a lieutenant commander. A take charge woman, if ever there was one. The other nurse in the shotgun seat weighed about 100 pounds soaking wet. Her name was Chris. She was from Wyoming. She had 9 children and a husband back in Wyoming. I said, is Wyoming the Big Sky state? She said, no, that's Montana. She said, we're the state with no people. And I said, well, it wasn't your fault. That was probably the dumbest thing I said during the whole debate. The third nurse was a Puerto Rican nurse named Maribel. She and her husband and her mother had an apartment not too far from our headquarters. They hadn't had power since Irma hit, or water. This was now 5 weeks. So we're driving out of town, and the ladies just stop at Walmart, and they leave me with the car, and they go in. They come back, and 2 of the nurses are laughing because when they got to the checkout point, they had these shopping cart full of these plastic containers, you know, where you've got 12 half-liter bottles of water, and they're held in this plastic thing in shrink wrap. And the manager came over, oh, no, only 1 per customer. And Terry held up her Red Cross credentials and said, we're taking these to people on the South Coast who were devastated by the hurricane. She said, you either shut up and let us leave with it, or I'm calling FEMA and we're shutting you down. To which the other nurses said, he said, yes ma'am, please come right on. She was a take charge person. We go down there, we go through this barrio that was right at the point where you saw the hurricane making landfill. Everything had been just wiped out, destroyed. Concrete buildings, the walls all caved in. They said, will you help us? I said, sure. So I had 1 trash bag on each elbow and 1 trash bag in each hand full of water bottles. And we walked up and down while the nurses were handing out water, food packs, diapers, infant formula, and finding out if anybody needed medical attention and telling them where the hospital was to go to. A lot of these people didn't even know they had a hospital 5 miles away. We stopped at the hospital and gave the rest of our diapers and infant formula to them. The only thing that stopped these ladies, we had a violent thunderstorm. We had to stop and get back in the car. They handed out everything we had. And by the way, the Red Cross workers, I didn't realize this until almost the time I left. Every day, those Red Cross workers left with 24-foot panel trucks filled from the bottom to the roof with supplies, and they emptied them, came back 2 more times each day. Every day they went somewhere in teams and just unloaded all these supplies. So in spite of all the confusion you saw by video, there was a lot of good work being done. That was one funny thing that I thought happened. The other was one day, for some reason, I ended up being the only person in the radio room. Somebody else went to lunch, somebody went to the men's room, I don't know. The door opens and there's this lady, very nicely dressed, introduces herself. She is from Atlanta. She was born in Puerto Rico, now lives in Atlanta. She is a local politician at either some county or state or a city. I don't remember which. And she holds up her cell phone and asks me, what are you doing here? And while I'm telling her what the ham mission is, she's interviewing me. The radio comes to life, and the guy goes, Kilo 1 Mike, this is Kilo Papa 4 Alpha Bravo Charlie, and then he, on Spanish, just flooded with Spanish. And I looked at her and said, can you help me? And she said, yes. So she ended up talking to this guy. I said, just push the button, and when you're ready, say over. She tells me that he's with the hospital, and they're running out of diesel fuel. So I get a name, I get a phone number for an administrator contact. We pass this up to FEMA, and I guess FEMA got them diesel fuel. Here this perfect stranger, comes in and ends up right at ham radio works again when all else fails. It really is amazing. All right. I learned a new word while I was down there, New Yoricans. Those are Puerto Ricans who now live in New York. They either moved there or they were born to immigrants who moved there. It is not a term that most Puerto Ricans like. It is a bit on the derogatory side. That's the way it's spelled. You can look it up in Google. New Yorkers. The fire department of New York sent 50 people back down there, and they were all Puerto Rican. And they were New Yorkers. They drove their vans just like they drive in New York City. That was my biggest mistake, was I hitched a ride from the dormitory to the Red Cross headquarters with a fire department of New York, Puerto Rican. He treated the four-way stop as if it was his stop, one way. Horn all the way through the intersection. I don't know how we made it. I'm going to give you a quick, I hope, update from the Corps of Engineers. If I can find this video. This lady is a Brigadier General in the Corps of Engineers, and she will tell you what the Corps had done. This was posted on December the 12th.
Good morning. I'm Diana Holland, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and I'd like to provide another update on the Corps' hurricane response efforts in Puerto Rico. We currently have over 4,000 people on the ground, and that includes Corps employees plus contractors, continuing to work hard to return Puerto Rico to normal conditions. We've installed 870 generators across Puerto Rico, including 2 large generators in Culebra. We've commissioned another large generator at the Yabucoa power plant. Critical facilities in that hard-hit part of the island will be energized in the coming days. As of last week, we've cleaned up 1 million cubic yards of debris across 43 municipalities. And as of this week, we have installed 20,000 blue roofs. Most importantly, we continue to work hard alongside PREPA and other power experts to restore electricity to the island. We are well aware that we have a long way to go in all of our missions, and will work very hard until they are complete. Speaking of working hard, I'm standing at the site of another important mission undertaken by the Corps of Engineers in Puerto Rico, the Portuguese Dam. The Corps spent 5.5 years to build this dam, which along with its neighbor, the Cerrillos Dam, provides flood protection to people who live downstream. Before its construction, the people of Ponce faced annual flooding and a cost in lives and property. The project was ultimately transferred to the government of Puerto Rico, and it continues to operate as designed, providing flood protection to the people of this region, even under tough conditions such as the extraordinary levels of rainfall from Hurricanes Irma and Maria. I'm highlighting this project because it is a part of the history of the Corps on this island, and is an example of our commitment to complete tough missions that bring relief and benefits to the people of Puerto Rico. Like our commitment to complete the Portuguese Dam, we are committed to helping FEMA and the people of Puerto Rico restore normalcy to the island. The Corps has a permanent presence here. We were here before the storms, we will be here during the holiday season, and we will be here long into the future. Estamos aquí, essayons, and building strong.
It is amazing to me that so many people are complaining at all levels in Puerto Rico about the level of the response. They were simply unable to help themselves, but they were very upset that FEMA and that the Red Cross, Salvation Army weren't there the day after the storm providing relief to everybody. It just wasn't possible. You don't just pick up 20,000 people and transport them 1,300 or 1,600 miles away. It took forever for that level of response that she was talking about to finally get there, and for poles to be reset and so forth. This was just an amazing undertaking.
Way, you said you were using a VHF or UHF radio, and now that's going to be line of sight. How did you get around the problems of your hills you were talking about? Did you put up repeaters?
Absolutely. amazed to find that most of the hams down there that owned repeaters had somehow gotten them back on the air, especially the ones up high in the mountains. We were using one that was well up above sea level. We had probably communication with the whole eastern end of the island. First of all, I'll answer your question here in just
Sure.
a second. Why was I selected? I still don't have an answer to this, folks. I'm assuming that the ARRL made the selection. Do I speak Spanish? Not only no, but heck no. Beyond ordering a Speedy B at the local, eatery, I don't speak any, I don't understand it. I don't know what WinLink is. I knew how to spell it. I didn't know what it did. I've never used it. I had no MCOM experience, no RACES, no ARES, no MARS. I'd never been national traffic net control station. I'd never deployed before. Why they picked me, I have no idea. Now, I'm glad they did. It was an experience of a lifetime, but I have to tell you, it was a bad choice for them. Now, all the hams got there. It was clear that the Red Cross had no idea what to do with us. Fortunately, we had the ARRL section manager. He said he understood ham radio, of course, and he understood how we needed to help the hospitals and the fire stations. So we adapted, we improvised, we overcame, the line from Heartbreak Ridge. We figured out how to deploy our people in teams and to these sites and set up our station so that it was monitoring for traffic 24/7. Would I do this again? You should never say never, but I'm not going to do it outside the United States, I can tell you that. I'll go to the coast of Georgia or Florida. Yeah, no problem there. This was an amazing event for me. I was just shy of my 75th birthday down there. And I got to tell you, some of you are ARES experts. This is not a hobby. ARES is not a hobby part of our hobby. If you're going to do emergency communications, you have to make the commitment to do the training, do the education, do the drills, work all these public service events. I still don't know what ICS is. Is that Incident Control System?
Incident Command System.
Incident Command System. I don't know what any of those forms or procedures are, but I was able to run an HF and VHF radio station and handle traffic. I started out every morning by saying at 7 a.m., Buenos dias, Puerto Rico. Kilo 1 Mike, K8EAB, special ARRL station in support of the American Red Cross Disaster Relief Operation, is now operating on this frequency. We very much appreciate the use of this repeater and thank the control operators and owners. Any station with priority or emergency traffic, please call now. No one ever did. But later on in the day, pretty soon the emergency messages started flowing. We did that every day for 3 weeks from 7 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock at night. We had people there overnight listening with the radios on. They slept on top of the conference tables. But after 2 weeks of that, we figured out that there wasn't any traffic in the middle of the night, so everybody went back to the dormitory. All I do know, I can tell you one thing, if I have to do it again, I'm ready to go. I got the, been there, done that, got the shirt. Did get a letter after I got back from the president of the ARRL congratulating me, thanking me. And if you haven't seen my YouTube video, it's not the best video I've ever made by any means, but it will certainly give you a feeling for the chaos at the headquarters and for some of the conditions that we saw when we were driving around. Puerto Rico will bear the scars of Irma and Maria for decades. Decades. So if you go to my QRZ page and scroll down very quickly, you'll get a link to the video. In addition to that thank you letter, apparently the league had one of these medals struck for all of us. front and back, and that's what the front and back look like. And I thank you very much.
Thank you, Wade.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Wade, given all you've seen, all you've done, and the conditions you did today, and the austere, the lack of materials, resources, cash, air conditioning, all of that stuff, if you could give us a couple of words, it could happen here tomorrow.
Yes, it could.
And what route would you suggest we take that we're better prepared?
Well, I think you're starting your ARES organization now, finally, seriously.
Yep.
I can't say enough about the mission that those people do, but I would encourage you to think about, should we do this in a vacuum? Should we start this up, having never done it before, do it ourselves? There are some very successful models around the country, and one of them is Clay County, or ARES.
Right.
They are probably one of the more successful ones. And they have a huge website. They drill constantly, they train constantly. Everyone is interchangeable. When Irma flooded out, Joe Bassett, the guy who was our leader, he couldn't get to the ARES headquarters. He was stranded at his house. He had to sit and listen to his people do all the exercises on his radio at home. They all worked extremely well.
Given that, don't take this the wrong way.
I was perfectly serious when I said, please don't even involve yourself in emergency communications unless you're prepared to do it
Okay,
as professionally as you can.
right.
Go ahead and do all the education, but do the drills, do the practice. You know, there's no substitute at this point for, you can't be an amateur and be in, this is the professional aspect of our hobby,
Right.
emergency communications.
What-
That's my opinion, I'm saying that to you after being down there. I was more of a hindrance in my own mind than I was an asset. However, we all found a place, a niche, and we fit in.
Do you think that this may have had an impact on Red Cross? What I'm trying to say is, Red Cross funds a lot of things.
I'm sorry, that what?
Red Cross can fund a lot of things.
Yes.
And they've got deep pockets and lots of resources.
No doubt about it.
What can we do to help get some roots into there so they can work with us, that now they've recognized what you can do, and you really did. It wasn't just talk, it was show.
No, we actually got it together. It took us about 24 hours to figure out what we were going to do because they didn't know.
Because here's Pete's
Yeah,
looking for a
we're
baby.
that's actually in the works right now, not an interrupt, but I had a meeting with one of the head Red Cross shelter folks for this area, and one of the things they came and talked to us at one of our CERT meetings. One of the things they're looking at doing is implementing ham radios into shelters in the event that communication totally goes down. So we've got a group of people through the CERT program who are going to be taking shelter management training, and some of us already are cross-trained in that, to be able to help out in a shelter here in Forsyth County, as well as Aries helping out too. The neat thing is we have the support of not only Sheriff's Office through me, but also the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center. So we're definitely on the map.
We got leverage.
Oh, we have more leverage than you can imagine, yeah, here in Forsyth County.
Because right now, I helped put an antenna in an obscure room somewhere over here with a converted taxi cab radio.
One of the,
Two
and not
internets.
to steal too much thunder away from the Aries meeting, but one of the things that we were discussing today in the meeting at the EOC is putting a Saturday together where we fan out. I think I may have mentioned that
Yep.
around the county, but we've added a thing to that. We're gonna get with dispatch and see if they would be willing to set up 2 portable dispatches in North and South Precinct and test out that area, but then simulate dispatching some calls. So I'm going to be meeting with Pat Giordano and a few of the 911 center people, and we're looking at doing that. we're just starting to set the framework for that, because it's not something that's been ever done in the past, but the train's left the station and is headed down the track.
Excellent, Pete. Excellent.
It was interesting to me, and Butch, I'll get you in just a second. I want to be talking about equipment and so forth. Our people who went out to fire stations found that every fire station had a ham radio station already set up in it, and no one knew how to use it. There were no hams in the fire department. There were Kenwoods, there were Icons, there were dipoles, trap
Funny
dipoles.
that you mention that, because in all the public safety radios and all of our sheriff's office and fire department radios, we have the Sony Mountain repeater channel in those radios. So, we programmed it in there. It was programmed in there by the county for emergency use, but down the road, we're gonna hopefully start to do some education and training in that. When we were talking today was, you know, if the pole went down, obviously we've got the ability to communicate on that as well. But again, just a lot of stuff to talk about in the areas.
Very much, Pete.
I was saying we made a lot of mistakes. There were no WinLink nodes anywhere in the Caribbean that were operable. So we were going to the USA and back, you know, from San Juan to Yabacoa.
How did y'all do it though? I mean, when you got there, did you just spray out portable ham radios throughout, or how did you set up the communication?
We sent out people to the fire stations and hospitals around the island at key points where we knew traffic was being collected by emergency workers. And
What
the
about-
hospitals were probably, in my mind, the place we should have been. There were not hospitals at every location, so the fire station was the next alternative.
How did y'all handle like calls for service, 911 calls on the island?
Good question. There wasn't a 911 system. We didn't handle any of that.
Okay.
That was just way beyond, I mean, you can imagine, 911 is so overused with people who don't really appreciate how to use it.
Right.
We were not involved in that at all.
So you guys weren't in any emergency vehicles or ambulances? or
No,
anything
we
like
were
that?
not. We were not. We had people stationary at these hospitals and fire stations. We had people going out every day with these teams of people. Then we had the three of us in headquarters. There were three other hands over at the FEMA operations station. I cannot tell you how huge the FEMA operation was. If you see my video, I walk into, I wasn't even supposed to be video there, and I walk around with the camera on. They were in this enormous auditorium room of the San Juan Convention Center, and there were people in black tactical gear everywhere with FEMA labels on the back, and signs at every table saying what this person, this function did. And they were very hard to work with, to be very candid. There were some turf wars going on between FEMA and the Red Cross when I got there. FEMA won, and pretty soon after that, communications started flowing from us up to FEMA. Nothing ever came back down from it. Did we make mistakes? Yeah, we made lots of mistakes. There were some personnel selection mistakes. We had 2 or 3 people on the team who behaved like absolute children. But, you know, nobody's perfect. Yes. Sorry, Butch?
2 questions. Number 1, did you handle traffic from the island to the States? Were you able to use a national traffic system?
No, we could have, but we did not. There were WinLink messages going to Newington, okay? But as far as traffic to nets, no, we did not do any of that. There were some people who stayed late at night and checked into nets just to see if we could do it with the dipole antennas we had. And, you know, but as far as traffic back and forth, there was one episode where we had a ham over on one of the islands. There's Culebra and there's Vieques, there's Desecheo. There's no people on Desecheo. But you have 1,600 people on Culebra, and this lady got burned over 37% of her body when a gas can they were filling a generator exploded. The ham that was there happened to be an EMT firefighter. He was one of our personnel problems that we had. He wrote up this long article about how he helped save this woman's life and uploaded it over to San Juan. to one of our hams who uploaded it to the ARRL, and they posted it without ever vetting it. And then he got on a net on 20 meters and sent her name and address and next of kin telephone, HIPAA violation. And when we called him on that, he got his back up and refused to communicate with us anymore. So we needed everybody back into San Juan on the 19th so that the gear could be inventoried, the laptops cleaned off, given back to the Red Cross, everything else staged at FEMA to go back to Newington. This guy wouldn't come in. So how we got him to come in is one of the operators at FEMA, Val, NB9M, sent him a message saying, Martha McCallum of Fox News wants to interview you about your life-saving operation. He was back in San Juan in 4 hours. With all of his gear, he had ridden a ferry boat back. You don't want to know how pissed off he was when he found out he'd been lied to.
Good luck when everything's out.
His call sign was he introduced himself to people in our team by saying, I'm so-and-so, call sign so-and-so. I was with the 101st Airborne. I did stuff that was deeply covered. This guy was a nutcase. You can look at his page on QRZ. Now he says it was just the greatest experience. He was happy to do it. He got back to the States, posted all on Reddit, cancel your ARRL membership now. He panned the whole operation on Ham Radio Now, the podcast, 2.5 hours worth. He had some valid points. There were some mistakes made. There's no doubt about it. One of the biggest ones was selecting him. Yeah, what else, Butch?
Or the rum distilleries opened before you got here and after you left. And how much rum was left?
I'm going to tell you now, one afternoon I went out and had a beer because I somehow got finished that day early. And one night I was invited to go to some locals' place where they had heavy hors d'oeuvres and a few beers. Other than that, I didn't drink the whole time I was there. I have no idea, Butch.
That call sign one more time.
Yes.
That call sign one more time.
On SMS?
And I found it very strange that, if 101st Airborne was so meaningful in his life, why didn't he stay in? Then after he got out, he was with the Naval Reserve in Kansas City. How does an Army guy go to Naval Reserve? I have my suspicions that he wasn't wanted along the way because we didn't want him very soon after we got to know him. He was, the Red Cross was actually considering sending an armed contingent to go get him.
What a wonderful presentation. That's a prelude to the question I need to ask.
Okay.
The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services,
Okay.
Health and Human Services, a little over a year ago published in the Code of Federal Regulations a requirement. There are over 7,000 of these entities in the United States. It's hospital, nursing homes, you name it. They are required, they were required, to submit an emergency preparedness plan due November of last year. My question specifically as far as San Juan is concerned, was there an emergency preparedness plan, even though this has been a prelude to November of 2017? If there was a plan, was it implemented? Did they have major problems? Or was it just helter-skelter?
I wouldn't call it helter-skelter, but I will tell you that when we got there, no one had a plan that I saw, including us. One of our biggest problems, we had no leader. No leader in Atlanta. And when we got to San Juan, we finally had to find somebody, and we found Joe, thank God. But we should have had a leader in Atlanta who was with us the whole time. The ARRL's guy, I don't mean to criticize him, but he didn't show up in Puerto Rico until 10 days after the rest of us were there. I saw him at the Red Cross headquarters one time for 5 minutes. He was off over maneuvering with FEMA, so.
Can I just mention real briefly, if anybody wants to, it's just really boring reading, but the Code of Federal Regulations goes into great detail about a year and a half ago describing this requirement for all these Medicare, Medicaid providers to come up with the emergency preparedness plan, and it's due November of last year. So it's the kind of thing where I am told, anecdotally, there's just various levels of compliance. Not to name names, but I'll just simply say that there are some really big hospitals in this region who will not even communicate on the issue, period. We don't know what they have, we don't know what their intentions are, and it's extremely frustrating to say the least.
I'm totally unqualified to answer your question. Honest to God, as far as finding someone who had a plan, people were simply trying to stay alive from one day to the next in Puerto Rico. And that included many of their highest officials were just simply not available.
It's kind of interesting in another perspective. I'm trying to get information on all this and what have you, but the one really positive response that I got out in my communications with I'm talking about the Jasper region. I've been a volunteer at Good Samaritan Health and Wellness Center for the past 14 years. And I knew the director. I sent her an email saying, could you let us know what you're doing in terms of emergency preparedness? Because even that little community health center has to respond. And she said, well, we're trying, we have a generic draft of something, and I know what she was talking about. It's a list of telephone numbers, and they're not a hospital, so they're going to close the doors in an emergency and send everybody home, anticipating whatever has to be done. So it's just kind of amazing to look at, but to add just another little anecdote to all this particular thing. The executive director of Good Samaritan was told about a year ago there would be a coordinated emergency preparedness plan done in the Jasper area, and nothing became of it. And so it's an incredible vacuum sitting out there. One of my thoughts is to try and elevate this thing to even a higher level in terms of these various hospital systems, which I'll just lay nameless for the sake of this conversation, and see what happens. But I'm not sure what their attitude is. I know that ham radio is getting a much more positive response in Central and South Georgia. There's a lot of activity going on in terms of linking up with hospitals and emergency preparedness. So far, we're really not seeing it here. So
Everybody likes to have a plan like that, but nobody wants to fund it until after the emergency happens. And then they say, well, geez, why didn't we spend this money? But then, nobody wants to spend the money or have whatever it costs to raise that money, i.e. taxes, whatever else, unless they have to. And that's why, unfortunately, we always seem to be behind the 8 ball. When you get hit by Puerto Rico, and I say, well, God, why didn't we have all this stuff out there in advance? Well, because, nobody wants to have 15, snow plows out here because you're only going to need them once in a blue moon,
I'm sure money's an issue. In terms of, I live in Big Canoe, and the emergency preparedness plan is quite elaborate in Big Canoe. Not surprising with all the professional retirees and everything. So, but the plan in Big Canoe, and by the way, a brand new, very elaborate fire station that's just been finished, will be open for actual business probably the next few days. The overall plan is to have not only a ham station at the fire station, but also at the Property Owners Association office, 2 stations within Big Canoe itself. And about a year and a half ago, we conducted classes, and we had about a half a dozen first responders go through the class, and they got their technician licenses. So that was an initiative taken by the fire chief, a fellow named Ricky Jordan. So it can be done if somebody will take the initiative to move on.
When I was in Puerto Rico, the mayor of San Juan is a lady, a Democrat. The governor of Puerto Rico is a gentleman, a Republican. The woman wants to be governor, and she threw darts at everybody. Trump, anybody and everybody. She was out wading up to her neck in water, handing things to people and criticizing everything. There's something like 74, 75 mayors of these little districts throughout Puerto Rico. And these people were hoarding FEMA supplies and giving them to their family members, their political contributors. The FBI was tasked to come down and find out what was going on, and then they started ditching all the supplies that FEMA had given them. They found all kinds of brand new emergency supplies and rations in dumpsters because people didn't want to get caught by the FBI hoarding these supplies.
I'm going to add just one more thing,
Yeah.
not to monopolize anything, but one of the contacts I try to initiate in all this is Georgia Department of Public Health, EPH. They're a really large organization, or at least they have a lot of influence. And looking at that organization for a possible contact, there is an emergency preparedness coordinator of a title of that nature. I've never met the woman or anything like that, but she got my standard email, just got down there, not or nothing this way. So it's, what can I say?
If you remember after 9/11, the big problem was none of those agencies could talk to one another.
Right.
None of them could communicate across their own, within their own frequencies, but they could communicate with each other. It's still that,
Yes.
from my understanding. And, yeah,
Jack was taken by ambulance to Scottish Rite. Ambulance driver, part of the way down, had no communication with anyone.
Puerto Rico.
That's
had not
here
had-
today.
Puerto Rico had not had a hurricane of that size, that magnitude in 83 years. So everybody had forgotten. No one was prepared. Even the local hams, thank God, got their repeaters back up pretty quickly. Don't know how they did it. I don't know how you get power to a repeater that's up at 4,400 feet. I assume it was solar and battery and maybe wind, because certainly the power grid just wasn't there.
I heard they were using NVIS too.
That's entirely possible, but
You didn't use it for,
we were using that, I can assure you that.
oh,
We were using 7085 single sideband as our HF frequency, and fortunately our antennas were fairly low to the top of the roof, so that worked out pretty well.
How much damage was the first hurricane before Irma hit?
Well, Maria was the second one, Irma was the first one.
Okay.
I don't know how much damage, I do know 1.5 million people lost power when Irma went by the north side of the island.
And then once Maria hit, that's
It
what
took
really
everything.
devastated everything.
Because this one took out the power plant on the south coast, and that is the only source of power. There was one or two big solar panel farms in the central part of the island. They're completely destroyed. So,
I got a question.
Yeah.
In one of those pictures in the Red Cross headquarters, looked like there was a couple people on cell phones. Did you have any kind of connectivity there at all?
first got there, I had to walk up to the top of the building, and then I got intermittent cell service. Toward the end of the 3 weeks, I was able to make a phone call from the radio room to my wife and usually keep the connection. We saw, as we were driving around, whole lines of cars pulled off to the right-hand side with their blinkers on. They had found cell service, and everybody was making a cell call.
Means they got overloaded because it's not engineered.
The FCC suspended all regulations. Anybody with a radio could talk to anybody on any frequency if they needed to. And believe it or not, there was no abuse of that. I suspect mainly because most of the people who would have abused something like that didn't have any way to, they didn't know about it. So, the Puerto Rican hams were very good to leave the repeaters free of chit-chat all day long.
Did you have K8EAB over there?
No, thank God, K8EAB, MAN's been gone to that great boneyard in the sky for a long time. So he wasn't a problem. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Do you know what the Puerto Rican hams are doing now? Are they now more motivated to?
I would hope so, especially with Oscar Resto, KP4RF. He was without power for months at his house, and he had a generator so he could fire up it when he needed to. But hopefully he will not let any of the people there, the hams, forget that, and they need to organize. They need to prepare, they need to practice, they need to drill, because it will happen again. It's a question of when. This was only one island. I mean, there are other islands that were just completely devastated. I forget which one it was. Antigua, I think, they only have like 1,600 people or something on the island. The governor or something declared the entire island uninhabitable. Everything on the island was destroyed.
St. Martin,
St. Martin?
San Martin.
St. Martin, both the French and the Dutch sides were heavily damaged. Heavily damaged. Are there any other questions about anything? I apologize to you for this random stream of consciousness.
Did you record this?
Someone did, I think.
Would you mind if we, would you put it online so we can post it to
Jim
them?
is supposed to upload it to the YouTube channel.
Great, great. Thanks for doing that.
It was absolutely one of the most unique experiences I will ever have as a hand radio operator. But they should never have picked me. So don't get involved in emergency communications in an amateurish way. Do it in a professional way. I mean, go all in. Learn what you need, practice, drill, organize, prepare. It's going to happen here. Something, a tornado, something.
Yeah.
All right? Thank you again.
Thank you.